Okay, welcome everyone. This is the second talk we have this year on the graphic Elisava lectures. And let me read a little introduction about our guest tonight. So, Anja Kaiser is a graphic designer and researcher based in Leipzig, whose work challenges conventional ideas about design and identity. Anja has been a typography teacher, professor at the Design Academy in Leipzig, among other schools, I think, as well. And her design approach is what she calls undisciplined, and I guess already by the title of the talk today, her approach to graphic design rejects rigid rules of hierarchy and legibility in favor of layered typography, bold contrast, and visual density. She worked across different media, including music, that often engage with feminist, queer, subcultural, and activist themes. So in short, Anja Kaiser blends activism, theory, and design using bold graphics and experimental typographic approaches to question norms, amplify marginalized voices, and carve out spaces for creative resistance. So please give a warm welcome to Anja Kaiser.
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction. That was a good one. Maybe I have to steal it from you. Hey, I'm Anja. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time in Barcelona. And I had already a wonderful day because we arrived yesterday and will for some stay for some more days. So thank you very much, Mark, for inviting me. And thank you all very much for coming to this lecture. For this lecture, I brought my toolbox. That's usually how I talk about my work, that I try to look at the working terms, and maybe that gives us also more grip on the conversation, what is graphic design. So the toolbox I brought with me is packed with some dirty, noisy media, undisciplined graphic methods, and a messy design history. In self-initiated projects, I engage with feminist issues. So there is this world in my graphic design field where I have these commissions works, which usually are in the cultural field and in the field of music. And then I also have projects that maybe somebody would call more as artistic projects, but I'm not so sure about all these categories. But yeah, usually that also has done a lot to do with feminist issues. So for me, tools in graphic design include, on the one hand, my dearly beloved design principles, such as D for dirty typography. The two-sided practice of reading and writing is directly inscribed in the word typography. And to expand on these binary qualities, I've added the attribution dirty to my typography. And obviously dirty refers to a lot of things like something is bad, naughty, not clean, or not good. And the dirty reference is actually borrowed from another designer, a textile designer and researcher and author who's called Marianne van Helvoet. She graduated from the Rietveld Academy in Amsterdam with the research topic dirty design, and called for an appreciation of the ambiguous, the fuzzy, and the subjective. The dirty side of typography, for me, aims to reveal ambiguous ways of reading and writing to enable relational, fragmented, embodied, and processual typographic translations. So usually when I start doing or designing, especially with words, and I usually try to do in my design, when I start designing, I do a kind of retranscription of a text. And sometimes I also do a rewriting or also a kind of misreading. I look for misunderstandings and many more. And that also gives me a grip of understanding like how or what kind of strategies do I need to start designing something. And on this slide, you can see a manual that I wrote, which is called Dirty Typography, that got published in a German design magazine, which is unfortunately, there are no editions anymore of this. But, and here I'm writing about a dialogue that I have with the page that I design, but also with the layers that I establish in the design. I have a dialogue on these pages with my software and also with my tools, like my mouse. And so I think that typography is anyways one of my main tools, and that is something that constantly I try to look at, like how do I treat these tools, and and also try to always work in a different way, and also try to look maybe not to peel something down, but instead to look of a lot of different meanings that are in the things that I design. And so beyond this aesthetic approach, I also have, I would say, specific conceptual approaches. And one of these working notions is simultaneousness, S for simultaneousness. I would describe this tool as an attempt to find an uncommon way of dealing with hierarchies in design. I mean, we cannot avoid the fact that we somehow always establish a kind of hierarchy in reading what comes next, what comes first, what comes after that. But I'm wondering always in my design, what kind of expectations is there, and how do I have to meet these expectations, or do I have to navigate around that? Am I the person who, per se, just because I'm a graphic designer, have to create order or prioritize? What would happen if I flip these hierarchies around? So a lot of my strategies is also, when I get something to design, I also try to collect a lot of material that I see somehow in the neighborhood of the theme of the text. And also I try to reuse material that is maybe also in the quotations or also in the references of a text. And there's also, I would say, a drive in my practice to kind of deconstruct things and then collage them again back in there. And so that at the end something, a design process happens that also becomes really eclectic, because like it tries to not just go into one aesthetic direction or in one typographic reading experience. Instead of that, try to come up with a lot of methods simultaneously, and also creating this kind of noise to give also some experience back to the viewer, and also that the viewer starts on deciding where to go. So simultaneousness is a process for me of translation and retranslation, of repetition, in order to entangle connections, contrast, and contradiction in my typographic strategies. And what you see here is this was a weekly publication that explored the impact of urgent contemporary issues on architecture. It was edited and published by students at the AA School in London from 2016 until 2019. And each week, I received a text which was published online and also reso-printed just in the week, by the end of the week, and then they spread it in the whole school. And due to that short deadline, I just had a few hours each day and each week to design these texts. So I think also this kind of repetitive job I had here also really made me aware of this kind of strategy. And actually, it's also a pretty interesting project, I think, from a student perspective, because they tried to get text from well-known designers, well-known architects, but also they wrote text themselves, which was just a two-sided essay. So it was really short, but they tried to fuel also the discourse in the school. Yeah, in addition to my fascination for typographic strategies in design, I can't avoid an enthusiasm for typefaces, characters, and signs. And I don't know if you know the sign, but this is the interior bang, a character that combines the function of the question mark and the exclamation mark. So one saying that would quite fit to the sign would be, "You're here." At the beginning of 2021, I held an interim professorship for typography at the Academy of Fine Arts in Leipzig for 2 years. Here you see some works of the students. They did during these 2 years when I was in charge of the class. And while I was teaching there, the curator of the art school gallery invited me together with the students and other professors to discuss the university's constitution after the pandemic, to realize a joint project. So the art school that I come from looks like that from the outside. It's in Leipzig. You can always enter, go there when you are in Leipzig. I would highly recommend to go there. And when you enter the school, it looks like that. So you end up in this huge atrium. And when you go into this tiny door there in the first floor, which looks tiny on this image, but it's actually very huge, then you end up in the gallery. As part of a many-headed team, we decided to connect the entrance area of the art school, which is that space, and through design and artistic interventions to realize the project called Radical Receptionist. So receptionist you usually find in the hotel, and we thought it's time for a radical receptionist in the art school. So the Radical Receptionist stands for a spatial performative intervention connecting these two central spaces of the art school with a score of rehearsal-like events and teaching formats. So first we jointly invited the different classes to move their meetings and the planned program to this room into the public in the public center of the school, because like in Leipzig, everybody can enter the school. You don't have to show anything to enter the school. And we thought, hey, everybody is just passing by. People after the pandemic really lost contact with each other. They don't stop in the atrium anymore. But what would happen if we would move the classes down to this area? And we would also always ask them that not just one class is realizing a project there. Instead, we said, like, there's just one rule. You have to meet with somebody else and do something together. So maybe some professors had to meet with another class or with other professors, or the staff from the school had to meet with the professors from the school. So that was kind of the rule we set up for the Radical Receptionist. And it's quite interesting because, like, when you see the architecture of the school, I think to me it's always quite impressive, but the students always had the feeling, because of this architecture, you do not know what's going on in the other classrooms, because you have these strong wooden doors and people would just be in there, have their class discussions, and it would not be very public. And we really wanted to get into connection again. So in collaboration with the student Hagen Tanneberger, I started to design all the communication assets for the school that showed the already organized program. So that was basically the main work, to write everybody, tell them about the idea, and to set up a program and to make it accessible to the whole school, that people would know, hey, there's the class from the fine arts department is meeting the design class, and they're gonna do drinks or a film screening together. And so you could just go there from another department and join their gathering. So in that sense also, the interior bank that I just introduced at the beginning, you're here, just suited perfectly this function. So to make that happen, we had to kind of realize a set of tools to give these different classes, really a room to do something in there. So we built these 2-channel screen installation at the main entrance to continuously update the program, and we also set up an online calendar that people could ask if they could join. Then we used these aluminum constructions by the performance artist and Professor Isabel Lewis, who also had a class in the school. And we used these kind of frames that she usually uses for her performances to put this interior bang graphics on it as a kind of movable furniture that you could also build a smaller room, make it more cozy, or kind of hide behind it whatever you liked. And we also browsed eBay to pick up free furniture from the neighborhood. And then the students also had the feeling, because the architecture is always, rooms are really high, like you usually have a ceiling in 6 meter high height. And so what they asked, they really wanted to have this kind of light ceiling to make this architecture feel more cozy, that they would like to stay in there. And then we also added this vertical gray code to kind of combine both of these rooms. And we provided a plug-and-play station. And we also went to one of our colleagues, the professor Anja, who was from the contemporary fine arts class, to get one of her artworks, which is called Feeling the Contemporary, but we actually called it then The Lobby Stranger. And we also wrote a service agreement which people could sign and also edit during the time being there. So for me, that was a really interesting project, also in terms of what graphic design does, is also like organizing structures to bring things together and look for what kind of communicative channels do you need. So in that sense, we realized a lot of different situations where also different professors, students showed their work together. They just did a one-day exhibition, and then next day there was a screening in it, and then next day there was a performative reading with 2 classes. So it was really exciting that this really got the people together after the pandemic, and people get to know each other. So, but tools for me also provide an insight into my canon, into the production of knowledge. And in my toolbox, you will always find a text which I always bring to my classes. And the tool I brought you here is M for Messy History. And this refers to an article of Martha Scottford, which she has written in 1994. The article is titled Toward an Expanded View of Women in Graphic Design, Messy History versus Neat History. You can also find this article online. It's pretty easy. Martha Scottford challenges the depiction of history in neatly organized boxes, linear epochs, and exceptional individual accomplishments, while lamenting the reluctance to introducing unfitting figures into the history of design, given the self-referential tendency in the mainstream design history and its preoccupation with previously canonized biographies. She demythologizes design work, which has always been collaborative. That's one of her main arguments in the text. And she pleads for the discussion of collective efforts and relationships in the design process, and also as a design historian to make these really, not just focus on these kind of monographic work, but also who's part of the process. So there are also the people from the print shop, there are also the clients, there are also the people looking at the design work. And and also to have a grip on this kind of, that there's a lot of dialogue going on in design work. And the title of her essay summarizes also the comparison between neat history as an expression of conventional history and messy history as a rebellious inscription of everyday visual culture of non-normative, personal, and expressive design activities. So she's also looking at design work that was, 20 years, 30 years, not 30 years ago, not considered as design work. It was considered as craft. Like in the Bauhaus, the people were, especially the women who were doing the carpets and the jacquard techniques. It was always considered to be craft and not design work. And she really challenges us to rethink, like, should we just focus on this huge story of, this is the big designer, and just this is considered to be design. It's not also people that maybe run their own shop and design their own piece of design because they don't hire a designer. What kind of design is that, and how does it look? So she really, tries to rethink what is design history, and also tries to step away from this linear story that we always look into design. Okay, there was this epoch, and then this came, and then this came, because usually, I mean, we like to think that things are so easy, but usually they aren't. So, but I think we also see that there are a lot of questions towards our discipline. So that's also not new, I think. There has a lot things have been done. So, and I found it quite interesting, you know, it's a text from the 90s, but it was never there in my design education. And I think there are a lot of texts like this, so they are all there. And it's also your responsibility to look what your references are and how you read design history, because I think it's quite important. And and to challenge maybe also your own narrative about it. So, and maybe it was Martha Scott Ford who consciously led me to one of my design heroines, Sheila Levranc de Bretteville, and her method of view for unstable science. This tool or design strategy is borrowed from the US graphic designer Sheila Levranc de Bretteville. Her practice is influenced by the political activism and the women's movement of the 60s, 70s in the USA. And later she became a professor at the Yale School of Art. She was running the department until some years. Now she's not in charge anymore. And I brought a video where she's talking about her concept.
There had been a group called Super Studio who were architects in Milan who did a series of cautionary tales about the future, and they also did one optimistic one. The cautionary tales are far more articulate because you really see like New York City of brains, only left over our brains, all in their own capsule, isolated from each other, all stacked up and some kind of thing. So they made these images, and then they made another one in which there's a landscape of a grid, a perspective grid, in which sort of two people with long hair, indeterminate sexuality, are walking into the future, and they wrote that grid was the equal distribution of goods and services. So for me, that kind of perspective grid that you see in the Women in Design poster is really, for me, references back the equal distribution of goods and services. But only people who know about Super Studio look at that poster and say, doesn't that have something to do?
Weird. Sorry. Sorry, I will play that one again. Not anymore. Let's check another video. Otherwise, I can just, and then I check. It's still, I'm on Black Magic, but there's no sound running anymore. But we can also improvise. Yeah. Sorry. Run it like that. Huh? I mean, now you can all leave. It's now your moment to leave. I'm sorry. I hope you still stay entertained. Ooh, ooh, ooh. First person leaving. second person. I don't know, shall we just continue and fix this when the technician is there, huh? Maybe you also want to leave. At some point, because you do not know how long it will. So what Sheila does here is she's talking about how she designed that poster and what all these references meant for her. And she's also referencing where all this material is coming from. And then she's also saying, hey, you're not supposed to know where this all comes from, but for her it's kind of super important that we also step away from this idea that you usually have to, that the viewers have to know everything. The video is running, and I'm also connected to the black magic, so I don't know what happened. Yeah. It just turned off. And see here, it's on. Yeah.
Vamos a probar lo típico.
Grid, in which sort of two people with. There had been a group called Super Studio who were architects in Milan who did they did a series of cautionary tales about the future, and they also did.
Yeah, I think we just plug it in and plug it out again. That's probably how we can solve it. Okay. Okay, let's listen to Sheila again, and then...
One optimistic one. The cautionary tales are far more articulate, because you really see, like, New York, city of brains, only left over are brains, all in their own capsule, isolated from each other, all stacked up, and some kind of thing. So they made these images, and then they made another one in which there's a landscape of a grid, a perspective grid, in which sort of two people with long hair, indeterminate sexuality, are walking into the future, and they wrote that grid was the equal distribution of goods and services. So for me, that kind of perspective grid that you see in the Women in Design poster is really, for me, references back the equal distribution of goods and services. But only people who know about Super Studio look at that poster and say, doesn't that have something to do with Super Studio? Da, da, da. I said, yes, but you happen to know about Super Studio. If you don't, it's a grid, it's a perspective.
Right.
You know, I think most of the things in that poster are unstable signs, because unless you know the moon is Angelica Kaufman's painting of design inspired by poetry, but unless you know that painting, that rondo, you see it's two women sort of very classically dressed, sitting together, having a conversation. There's a lot in it, but I think if you look at it, you see a landscape. And you see a moon, because it's the phases of the moon, and you see eye bolts moving in the landscape, and you see a bunch of palm trees there. So you could make your own story in a way out of that would be different than the story I tell myself about what I'm doing. There were other interpretations.
So I think it's quite interesting that Sheila is really in this era of modernism, and this is also the big argument that you try to peel things down to one meaning, and that you would think like, okay, you have this one meaning and everybody understands that. And instead of that, she also comes up with these multiple references, and she also gives back the agency to the viewer. And what I like so much about her position is also that in that time, she really said, like, I would like to allow my design to integrate personal image associations, and also embracing the reinterpretation by the viewer and making that for a reason for design. And a plea to leave this role of the enlightened graphic designer who tells you You have just to go there or read it that way. So when I created the design for the Digital Feminism Festival in 2018, a festival that explores the emancipatory possibilities of technology and feminism, I also worked with various unstable science, and I interpret these references also as references for care work, skill sharing, amplifying voices, but also to refer back to earlier feminist voices. But you can also read these signs in a different way. And to me, this poster is also a tribute to Sheila's Eyeball. But they did this. They brought from a Home Depot shop these eyeballs, and they just made necklaces with these things. And I thought it's so nice to refer also in this poster back to a design conference that was also for women way earlier, which I thought is also a nice gesture. So I think the things we do create in graphic design do not emerge in a vacuum. They are influenced by encounters and experiences. In the summer of 2013, I did a trip through New Mexico, and I got to know the work of the American painter Georgia O'Keeffe. She's known for her opulent desert landscapes. I think she's one of these women on the art market that got the highest sales, or her works were the first one. And she always draws these opulent landscapes from New Mexico, which depict this vast emptiness. And she draws fantastic close-ups of plants which verge almost in surreal abstraction. And during that trip through New Mexico and seeing these paintings and the landscape, I received a request from friends of mine, Christoph Knot and Konrad Renner, who got approached by Sonic Acts for doing a larger visual campaign to celebrate their 30th biennial. And Sonic Acts is a kind of interdisciplinary arts organization based in Amsterdam. And their topic was called, or the theme of the biennial was called The Spell of the Senses. So it was really about talking about the ecological framework in arts and sound art, and also in music theory, and also embracing the urgency of rethinking relations across species. That was kind of the curatorial statement of the biennial. And this whole theory relates to a book of David Abram, which is also called The Spell of the Senses. So the graphic design concept we developed serves as a kind of vehicle for exploring the nuances of human reception. The concept focuses kind of looking at a communication that is maybe beyond our human communication. It's more about the communication between plants, landscapes, but also the nature, but also different species. And we thought it could be very interesting for this concept to come up also with a communication that is not just rational in terms of an alphabet, but also a kind of an embodiment of the physical and sensory experiences, and also pushing for an abstraction of language. So kind of, if you could summarize it, it was kind of to go beyond a human-centered concept. So we were largely inspired by the paintings of Georgia O'Keeffe, because there were also these missing humans. And I will show you a trailer now and a screencast of the website to show you a bit how the visuals that we worked on lead into these communication assets. See, here would be sound also, but it's not there. But we will not make a thing out of it. what you can see here, or how I would summarize the main design elements, you have on the one side these kind of asemic signs. Asemic signs are, you could say asemic writing is also a writing that is abstracted from language. So you come up with this kind of gesture as if something would look like a letter, but it's actually not readable. There is no meaning, but there's a gesture or maybe even an emotion attached to it. Then you have this kind of, especially in your video, you saw that, and on the website, the sonic acts, which is kind of moving around, and we animate it in a way as if it's breathing. And then, so you have this breathing typography on a macro level, and then you have these, this observational typography, I would say, on the micro level, that you kind of look, you have this kind of monospace and the table as a gesture of documentation. And then you have these kind of species that would wake up in these different landscapes. And you see somehow it's not just a landscape, there's an eye popping up and looking back at me. So that you would wake up all these different sleepy creatures and also show that on the website. And luckily, we worked this year again for Sonic Acts. And again, we work in this constellation together. And this year, the theme is Melted for Love. And the visual concept that we developed in collaboration serves also as an entry point into the fragile architectures of belonging, love, and perception. It reveals how notions of shelter and intimacy are never fixed, but instead remain porous, shifting, and contingent. By unsettling the familiar, refracting, inherited symbols, the concept for us is a dialogue between safety and definement, solidity and dissolution, warmth and estrangement. So what we were wondering about is like Melted for Love is also an urge to find a home, a space together. So we were looking at these different blueprints that you saw that kind of build spaces for tents, for houses. And we thought, what if we take this notion of having some kind of room where you meet each other, or you go into another space to meet even in a smaller room, or into in a bigger room. So also to kind of reflect on this, like, the whole biennial is very much about this gesture of coming together, and how do we actually do that? And that maybe also means we need a house, a shelter, a home, to really make sure that we can invite somebody and have this gesture of love somehow there. And and there's also Melted for Love also for us seemed very much of, it could also be easily run into a cliche, but we understood that it's really the moment to welcome each other also, and therefore we thought that the house or a room would be actually the perfect match also to show this safety and warmth. And because then also there's something else happening. You turn from this public space into this private space, and that maybe makes different encounters possible. But then we also thought of a house that is maybe more porous, maybe also unstable, and sometimes also imperfect, or doesn't work yet as a house, or as we think of a house. And then we also thought, next to this blueprint of watercolor paintings, to deconstruct the familiar notions of space, dissolving the boundaries between inside and outside, and softening the perception of what is supposedly clear and objective. So at that time we were super intrigued by the work of Frank Bolin and Helen Frankenthaler, who are painters that go for, here you see their watercolor paintings. And we thought that this is actually super interesting to look at, also to have a kind of friction with this blueprint aesthetics. And then when we thought of the sonic acts, we thought, hey, when I think of love and typography, I immediately have to think of this epic love work from Robert Indiana. I think it was a work he did for a big museum in New York, and it was actually a Christmas card. This love typographic composition, and we thought, hey, maybe we can somehow go back to that. And also, it shows so much. I mean, it went in so many different contexts, and later it also for the movement. For the demonstrations in the 80s about AIDS, they also used it to kind of play with this meaning of what's the perception of AIDS and who's perceived to have AIDS, And we just thought, hey, it's also interesting for our typographic strategy to kind of rely on these kind of histories. And even you don't know about it, that's the way how I work, or I usually always work in collaboration. And I'm very much also looking, when I'm looking in my work, for references also for others, and also make them available again. And usually also talk in the concept about it, and also make it part of the visual concept again. So, and then we also have this typographic kind of system with, again, a monospace that kind of works more with the ideas of the blueprint. But then we have this wonderful typeface limpet of Jum Young Lee Type Foundry from Amsterdam, which is this really soft serif font that brings a lot of contrast, but also a lot of warmth due to the high X height of the letters. And here you can see also a moving teaser we did together with Nelly Nakahara, where we kind of start building this house. And then you go through that house, you see that these spaces change, and then you have these aquarelles, you're moving through them, and then this is kind of the whole identity, how we play it out right now. And there's a super nice feature also about on the website, which I wanted to show you. So you can also go through this blueprint on your own and leave a trace and kind of draw on the website, which is the magic work of Christoph and Konrad, I also have to say. But we also always try to look for concepts that you have in the moving sphere, but then you also have on the web sphere, but then you also get it into the printed matter. So here you kind of see how we play out the whole concept, which is always a lot of fun to start doing it and then really see, especially when structures get so huge, that it also allows for a lot of diversity. So I see it's already 1 hour almost. I'm not even half through my lecture. But I will try to be a bit more faster. So as you can see, one of my design principles is also non-linearity, and that would also relate back to the messy history of Martha Scottford. So yeah, I always have a hard time working in a linear way. And I don't think that there's anything problematic about working in a linear way, but maybe these are not my tools. And when I got invited this year to design the visual campaign for the International Graphic Design Biennial in Chaumont in France, here the concept for the biennial was the theme noise. And the director, Jean-Michel Géridin, explains in his introduction of this term noise, and for this graphic design biennial, for him, on one hand, noise represents discontinuity, the idea that history cannot be viewed as a linear continuum, but rather a network of forms, of diverse forms of expressions and narratives that are yet to be fully understood. On the other hand, noise refers to the constant emergence and transformation of things, some of which have never entered the historical record. Furthermore, noise symbolizes also disruption or interruption, which can serve as a catalyst for new movements and new modes of expression, especially in our field and when there's happening a collaboration between music and design. So noise also highlights the dynamic relationship between music and visual interpretation, whether through collaboration or coincidental outcomes of encounters between artists, musicians, and designers. So this biennial takes this frame, noise also as making noise, becoming loud, but also as having maybe a kind of beef, because that's also the French meaning if you go into the etymology of the word. And then, so the conflict is one notion to that. And then you also have noise as it relates to music. And this biennial was also very much focused on showing contemporary graphic design and historic graphic design, but also looking specific at in the collaboration between music and design. So when I thought it's such a privilege to design for this biennial, I thought, yeah, okay, I cannot do noise on my own, so I have to invite again somebody else to make this polyphony happen. And I invited two of my former students, Nelly Nakahara and Gerrit Brox. And we came up with 3 working methods for noise. And A is for interpretation and transcription, B for disruption and division, and C is for a method of disturbance. So this campaign tries to bring together different design approaches that are guided by the concept of interpretation and transcription. And both concepts are closely connected to music, as the biennial is also focused on music. So they showed really like epic music posters, epic album covers, and so on. So interpretation can be understood as the sum, rather the overall picture of all the nuances and inflections that emerge during the performance of a piece of music. In music, interpretation primarily refers to the execution or presentation of the composition by the interpreters, who are in this context the designers. So the interpretation usually differs from the original piece and can be understood as a subjective gesture. So what we did is, first we thought, okay, let's think all about noise and let's write a fictitious playlist. So we did a playlist because we thought we have to find a writing method that still represents music also. And then we thought, like, actually we love playlists because they also have some meaning and can be also understand as a kind of an essay. So we really used it as a storytelling. And then we thought, like, hey, it's in France, so we also mix the languages, as it's an international design biennial. And so we took elements from the curatorial statement, but we also translated sounds of everyday noise into onomatopoeia. And we also quoted from song lyrics like from FX Twin and Sophie. And we also used phonetic transcriptions, references from musical instruments, or we explicitly referred to the exhibition, because there are also some pieces were in the exhibition, like the soothing sounds for babies. So for us, that was like the first method. We work with this kind of fictional playlist as a form of interpretation. And then we thought about the way of transcribing something, and then you immediately think of the graphic transcription of things. So you would listen to a piece of noise, you would think of the structure, of the harmony, of the rhythm, of the technique of the composition, you would maybe think of the position of the performers in the room. So we really, we played with these really basic symbols to do our own graphic notation of noise. So there have been like multiple ones. And then we thought, okay, now we have these kind of two ways of working with noise. Like we have this kind of more linguistic approach, and then we have also this more atmospheric, emotional approach. And and based on the definition of the term noise, we proposed using the method of division and disruption as a central principle of the campaign to create a kind of friction and to find a way to combine these different methods. But because we also thought, hey, it's such a huge work to work for this design biennial that also shows such a variety of designs. We also want these different design approaches to go into conflict. So we thought about that usually in the communication, the program, usually it's just a bold poster, bam, and we thought, yeah, but there's so much happening on this biennial, so let's take this layer of the program and make it also a design tool. And as you see, I have a lot of fun with different hierarchies and different typography on very different levels. So I thought, how can we use these different elements of translating the term noise and bringing it together? And so we thought of this friction and to create this kind of conflict between these different visual languages. And then we also thought, I mean, you easily get obsessed when you are working on a theme. You start seeing this theme everywhere. So, of course, we were thinking of Kraftwerk and the Autobahn. In Germany, especially, we think of the Autobahn. Then, during our weekends and having a good breakfast, we thought of the egg timer and the barking dogs in front of the supermarket that made some loud noises. And also these barking dogs, the coffee machine, the refrigerator. We were always just like, actually there's always noise and there is no silence. And maybe we can also work on these tiny animations to make the whole story about this this campaign, to give it also more and more life. So Nelly built all these, so we collected all these signs, and Nelly thought of these different ways of animating these tiny signs, and we used them throughout the whole campaign. For instance, I have a really loud clock in my office, and it really calms me down. That's also what noise does. It calms you also down, the ticking of this clock. So here you see how this variety of different assets and visual language also played out during the whole campaign. And that we could also say, like, okay, with this media, we go more into this linguistic approach, and with the other ones, we go in more an abstract, or we go more into this typographic approach. But that's always what I have a lot of fun with, to kind of build a visual system that allows for a lot of variety, but also gives you an atmospheric image to look at, because I also think that's as much as important as looking at the program properly. And and if you don't know the Graphic Design Biennial in Chaumont, I love the museum, I love the biennial. It's in 2 years, it's again, you should definitely go. It has the richest collection of silkscreen posters, and it's just wow. And and then we also had this, of course, and then it came up, hey, we have to also design the catalog. And usually, you know, that kind of graphic design conferences or competitions where you have this catalog, and we thought, like, come on, it's noise. We really have to make a magazine, because that's actually how I got into graphic design, by an obsession with music. And having a lot of good music magazines and music albums in my home. So and I miss that really a lot, because it taught me so much about graphic design. And so we thought we really want to make an homage on all the different articles we have in this catalog, and not just show the posters. So we thought about a strategy to kind of play out also our toolkit with the playlist, with these different noise symbols, but also showing the poster competition, Also showing the text, kind of the institutional text from the director, and creating also some fun and noise always in between. And I will rush now a bit through it. I also have this catalog with me if you want to have a look at it. So you have kind of all the institutional layer, which is connected to that kind of fluorescent green that also works like a green screen to look at the posters, but also show them next to each other and not just separated large on one page, because like we think visual language also happens on the streets in counter to other visual languages. So we always think that this is important. And then and now you see like this is still also the text of the director of the biennial, which is giving a bit more of the background of the theme of noise. And we introduce already some new assets. And then there's a text of Roche Klapp, which is also about the digital image and the noise, which we did in a completely different way. Then there's also a book prize, which we did in a different way. There was an exhibition that worked on the history of metal logos. So we designed that in a different way. And there were always, there were also always some variables that were more, or that were more close to one side of the concept, but it's all at the end still one language that allowed for a really eclectic coming together, I think. So, and I mean, I was really lucky when I got this job to design. I mean, if you design for graphic designers, you can go way more wild. And that's such a privilege also. And usually I work also in the field of music. Since 8 years, I'm working now for the Rewire Festival, which is an avant-garde music festival based in the Netherlands. And here you see the identity of 2025. And for me, sometimes I think, it's not so experimental. There are a lot of restrictions. And you maybe will see that if you look at all the different campaigns. It's a tough boss. But we always try also to come up with a new formula of working. And in this year, it was very much the focus of ears to the ground. So the music festival tried to have a lot of different artists also working in the side program with field recording. And we were so attracted by that idea, ears to the ground, that we thought, let's make it for us as a strategy into eyes to the ground. And we just started frottaging, using different techniques to kind of trace everything what was around us and see if we could make a visual kind of field recording to get a campaign out of it. And so we used these kind of dusting methods. We used relief scanning to uncover and reconstruct certain imprints on the streets, and then making a whole concept out of that. This was the campaign of last year, and today we just started releasing the new campaign, which you will, if you're interested, see in the upcoming months. And then it's actually also very exciting to see how to translate all these ideas again back into a moving image, back into a huge banner or flags, and then also again into printed media. I'm sometimes really sorry that there is so less printed media more and more. But that's one of also really my money jobs that I'm doing the whole year. And back to my toolkit, I would say that it's not just about how you work in graphic design or how you look at your own references. For me, it's also to think about who am I when I'm working. And I have the feeling that I'm constantly in a kind of rose billet. So, I don't have parents who come from graphic design or arts. I'm born and raised in Brandenburg, which is the eastern part of Germany, and nobody brought me really to the museum. And I mean, I was lucky that at some point I realized that there was a workshop in the museum that I could go to. But actually, I would say really going into the cultural sphere was nothing that was part of my daily routine. And it really happened when I started organizing myself in subculture and doing my own concerts with a bunch of friends and doing trashy concerts where 20 people would show up with 3 dogs. And then from that on, I started to design these posters. And I think this is still something really relevant to me, that I work with friends of mine to host cultural events and to set up also festivals and concerts. And this is the Balance Festival, which we did for some years. So I was not just a graphic designer here, I was also writing funding applications. I was also doing the structure of the work. Right now I'm hosting another series which is called Riddle, also with a bunch of friends. Here you can see a website we did together, Jonas Hohlfeld and I, who's a great coder. And I mean, what you see here is always the happy ending. It's always the eye candy at the end of such a project. And of course, since I'm a graphic designer in this group, so I'm also writing the funding application and setting up and cleaning up the venue. Then I would always say, hey, when I design the things, I have no restrictions. I can do what I want, and it should be as experimental as it is. And I also get almost no money for it. But I think these jobs really made me visible in the scene, and also by that, people start approaching me and say like, hey, would you like to design this and that? But yeah, the backside of this is actually this. So, and I mean, we can do that also, I think, really well as graphic designers, because we have some ideas about systems, setting up structures, and structuring things like that, I think is also a very important side of that. So you see, I love, so most of my work is working in Excel sheets, and that's sometimes annoying for the people I collaborate with, but it really, I think it would not be possible to work like that if I would not have professionalized also in these really different roles. And that's just what I want to tell you, that I think, there are a lot of roles you have to take on and to professionalize and learn new roles. And that can be also really tough and annoying. But I think it's part of our future as well. So here you see the campaign we did for this year, where we started to have access to a new venue that was in a dome. And I also tested some new things. I think it's, for me, here it's not so important to talk about the graphic design right now. It's more about my own role. Hey, I have some more things to go or to show, but I also have the feeling it's also nice to have a Q&A. So I'm also happy to get into conversation and to stop here, when you have questions already. And otherwise I can also just click through the slides. But I also see that maybe people are getting, do not have so much attention anymore, so I don't want to make it harder for you. Are there any questions yet?
Yeah, any questions for Anja?
Hello, I'm Zosha. Before I say my question, I love how you showed the Excel file and it looks like your design. So this is also funny how unconsciously we put things. My question is, do you plan your designs? Do you sketch them? Probably, I guess, no. And how you deal with kind of instinctive role in your design? How far you go back in your process? So my question is, how do you plan the end result?
I am. Thank you very much for this question. So usually I don't know at the beginning how things gonna look like. So it's really, and it's also it's really, it starts with a huge collection of files, references, sometimes also going into a library or having a book that I'm reading already and be reminded of it and try to find a connection. Or like I showed you, I'm in New Mexico thinking about this biennial, and then it's also about these ecological frameworks. And then I think of Georgia O'Keeffe and I think, hey, that might make sense, and why not looking more at her paintings and try to find a connection. But then it's also, then I think also it's important to go more beyond, to make our own image of it and something that you, at the end, when you look at the Sonic X biennial material, you think, it's again the biennial. You don't, as a viewer, you do not have to have the clue of, you have not to have seen everything. But I think you kind of need a strong campaign to be remembered, and then that you at some point start looking it up. But I think, that's always the best part, to not know where it will lead to, and then stitching the different parts together, like from the references to the color palette, the way I produce things. I usually also look for new workflows. So sometimes I start also by installing programs I never have used before, because I'm curious about it, and to see how I can make a workflow out of that. Because for these campaigns, the biggest problem is that you really have to find also a campaign that you can scale up to 10 by 10 meters for these huge banners in the Rewire Festival City Center. But then you also need to have them, have to have a huge variety, and you have to make it work. And I don't do it with AI usually. So, and then I also have to make it work in the budget. So, so there are a lot of things also to think about, right? But I think that's always the interesting part of the riddle, that you do not know what it will look at the end. And that's also why I so much love to do my jobs also in collaboration. It's always not that I hire people. I always ask, hey, you're a good friend of mine, I would really trust you, let's go into a collaboration. And so I have a lot of collaborations where we all do, we work in one position as the art directors, designers, executors, animators, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. I really like your style, and I was very inspired. And I have more maybe technical question connected with your previous answer about references. What you usually use as references? Could you describe this part of work a bit?
You mean like references for visual things?
Yeah, from what you start your design, because it seems like a lot of stuff here, but from what you start as a reference.
Yeah, usually, if you are approached by a biennial, you would start reading the curatorial text, and then you would look into the references of this curatorial statement. But then I think at the moment I have a fascination to look into the arts and to look for artists that I might feel a connection to it. But sometimes it's also graphic designers like Sheila, where I say that would be a moment to pay an homage to her, which is another graphic designer. Or sometimes I would start by reading the curatorial statement and think okay, maybe it's it's about how we work, and maybe I need to work different with my tools. So really think from the beginning on of different materials also to work with. I think it's not so linear. I cannot say I would always go to an art show and try to find a connection. That's not what I do. It very much depends on the client and the job. Sometimes it's the architecture. Sometimes it's the sometimes also the way how would you write things. I'm very much interested right now if we could also find different ways of writing on a poster, not just location, date, Maybe there are also different ways of approaching people linguistically, and maybe I can make that also part of my strategy. So it's really mixed. I'm sorry that I'm not precise here, but I cannot be, I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It's amazing, and I really love your work. I
Thank
wanted
you.
to know if your process of thinking, if this process of thinking and creating that you are showing us, if you were, like, how did you develop it through time? Did it start when you were doing your academic studies, or was it something that you started developing much more when you started doing your own work? Did you feel restrained by the academic structure, maybe?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, because that would have been one of my next projects that I would have shown you. So you have to imagine I studied in the art school in Halle together with my dear friend Jeanette, who's sitting there. And you know, like in Germany, people would say the German art schools, typography, it's very neat, it's really precise, especially like Leipzig, where I'm now based. Like, it's really the city of the book. Like, there were a lot of huge print shops. It was really the center, the hub in Germany for book fairs. And so I had a really traditional, but a really, really good and precise typographic training there in the art school. And then I had the possibility to go on a master. And I thought, like, yeah, what do I do now? And luckily, I got a scholarship to leave Germany, because I thought I have to go to another country, to another school, to also realize what is the language, the vocabulary I come from. And yeah, I mean, I would have not so much a clue, so that would be such a hard cut, but I was very much a fan of Metahaven, Daniel van der Velden, Finke, Krug. And Daniel taught at that time at the Sandberg Institute in the Netherlands. This is the Master Institute of the Gerrit Rietveld. And I applied for the Sandberg Institute, and I got in, and it was with like 15 other international students coming from Sweden, Italy, China, really from the whole world. And I mean, we were standing in front of each other and we did not know anything. I mean, we could not talk to each other about graphic design, because the worlds we were coming from, the visual culture we were coming from, it was so different. And then there was also Daniel saying all the time, hey, Anja, graphic design, it's not what you think it is when you just think you design a book. And I mean, he was very much into, I mean, now they're way more into visual arts and also into the film and the movie as a visual way of narrating. But when I was there, I really thought, like, okay, I can, I mean, I know how to design a book, and I love it, and I still do also design books. But it was super interesting for me to understand that telling a story can go through every body, through every vessel, and to really understand that everything has kind of a surface that I could go on with the graphic design and think of it from a new aspect. And I think that was really the Sandberg Institute that made me also realize so much of my own canon. It was basically just because of this cultural shift. I mean, now you would say in Netherlands, in Germany, it's also not so far away, but it's so different in tradition. Also, when you then compare it to Switzerland. And yeah, and when I was in my master's, I basically started writing about feminism, and I released a towel collection by that time that also came with an essay that was actually the user manual for the towel. And it was also connected to a Tumblr blog. And I published the essay on Tumblr, and I had these kind of towels. And the towels, it was also for me about building a product, because I thought, like, feminism, to me, it's very much related to the story of economics and who has access to the market. So I also thought I have to put this narration on a tool that somehow relates to the market, la la la. So you see, and the Sandberg was really like, yeah, of course you have to design a towel collection. I mean, and in my former school, or before, I would never have thought of, but this kind of really opened up my mind, like how many different ways are there to go. But it was also then that I was in Amsterdam in 2014. I finished my master. I thought like, okay, if I want to work like that, I cannot stay here, because like in Amsterdam, I would need to get a job in a cafe or whatever to pay my rent. So I go back to Germany. I go back to Leipzig, where I know a lot of friends who are also like in the subcultural scene and politically engaged, and I pay really low rent and just do what I want and do 100% graphic design, and allow also for this, or try to find ways to get money from cultural funding to do our own things. And that's then how it somehow worked out and became a good recipe. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I guess I was wondering about your commissioned work, mostly about your approach to the theory and how do you jump between research and the execution of the project? How do you get to this final result? Yeah, how does it work for you? Thank you.
Maybe can you help me a bit, like with your question? Like you mean commission work with clients, like how I do put references in there, or how do I present them?
Yeah, mostly that. And just how do you do your research prior starting of the project? And how do you switch between the research for the project and then the experiment for the project, and then the final product?
Yeah, I don't know. Take as much time as I can. Because that's what I said, you know. Sometimes I have also a bunch of clients that I have a close relationship to, and you talk a lot about also their thinking behind it. Sometimes you also don't have to do it all on your own. Sometimes you also need to have a really good communication and good dinner together to find out what they want to do, and you try to push that even further. So then the research is a dinner. And sometimes I feel the urge to read something and to really take the time, but I think like what's most important for me is also to make time. So most of my clients is like to really say like 4 or 5 weeks to really dive into it, and then to become also obsessive with the people that I'm working with, and then to look for what's the best question to ask, or the best book to ask right now for this commission, or the best, maybe it's sometimes also, maybe it's not always so intellectual, you know, sometimes it's also a feeling you have, or a smoking break with another friend when you talk about this commission. I mean, I would not intellectualize also everything, even though I then have the feeling sometimes I have to intellectualize it to make it resonating, and to also get trust from the people I work with, that they push it even further. Yeah. Does that help as an answer?
Thank you.
More questions?
Cool, you have so many questions. That's really nice.
Sorry, one more question.
Sure.
So you talked about like your values and trying to make the design political, which I think is really great. But when clients approach you, do they also want you to make works that are feministic, that have this as a main objective, or is it something that comes from you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's also that I'm very much coming out of this feminist scene, and I also had the feeling in the last years that I'm not so, I mean, in the graphic design scene, a lot of people know about it, but I'm not so sure how much that translates to clients outside of the field, because I got a lot of strange commissions that I then said, no, I don't want to do it. And I also don't want to, I'm not sure if we mean the same by feminism, so it's probably not worth if they try to approach me from that agenda. And there are also jobs where I read a curatorial statement and I think it's, if I have the guts, but sometimes I do that, also say like I'm not okay with that politically, and I would jump off. When I also see that, I always try to get in dialogue with people about it when I see also something that I have an argument with, and because I think that's something we miss right now very much, to stay in dialogue and not be so black and white sided. But then when I see that there is no space for dialogue, I also did or stopped also bigger campaigns. But I think I try to more and more, I don't have a website. They are not in the biography, and usually I'm very lucky with the people that I get approached, that I also know one person over the other, but it's also the privilege of being visible in the field. That's not so easy for everybody else, but I would not say, I think you cannot be a feminist designer in that sense, because I don't think design can be feminist in that sense, but for me it's very important to think of how do I work, who do I make visible if I have the chance, and what kind of references do I bring on the table, so people maybe sometimes also see that way later, that I bring a different reference than they thought, or
One more question for Anja.
Now everybody's fried, huh? I can understand.
Thank you very much, Anja.
Thank you. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity of coming here, and thank you for all the nice questions. That's great. Sometimes that does not happen. Have a nice evening.